The year is 1943. A woman walks into a Gestapo headquarters in occupied France. Her hands aren't trembling. Her eyes don't dart nervously toward the exits. She carries herself with the quiet confidence of someone who belongs there, someone unremarkable, someone the guards have seen 1,000 times before. They wave her through without a second glance. What they don't know is that beneath her plain coat and ordinary demeanor, she's carrying intelligence that could shift the entire trajectory of the war. Her name is Odette Sansom, and she's about to rewrite the rules of what it means to disappear in plain sight. This isn't a story about masks or elaborate costumes. This is about something far more profound, far more unsettling. It's about the terrifying reality that anyone, anywhere, could be someone entirely different from who they appear to be. For over a century, the art of disguise has been perfected not by adding layers of deception, but by stripping them away, by understanding that the most powerful illusion isn't in what you show, but in what you make people believe they're seeing. Right now, as you're listening to this, someone somewhere is becoming invisible. They're transforming their identity so completely that even their closest associates wouldn't recognize them. Intelligence operatives are walking past surveillance systems that cost millions of dollars. Covert agents are building entire lives, complete with family photos and childhood memories that never existed. The question isn't whether disguise works anymore. The question is whether we can trust anything we see at all. Let's go back to where it all began to evolve into something extraordinary. Before World War II, disguise was theatrical, obvious, the domain of stage performers and con artists. But when the world erupted into total war, everything changed. Suddenly, nations needed their people to become ghosts. They needed operatives who could walk through enemy territory as if they owned it, who could sit across from Nazi officers at dinner parties and never once betray their true purpose. The stakes weren't applause or profit anymore. They were survival, liberation, the fate of entire populations hanging on whether a single person could maintain an illusion under interrogation, under torture, under the constant weight of knowing that one slip meant death. The genius wasn't in elaborate makeup or prosthetics. Those World War II operatives understood something that would become the foundation of all modern covert work. People see what they expect to see. Our brains are lazy. They take shortcuts. They fill in gaps with assumptions. Show someone a middle-aged woman in a worn coat carrying groceries, and their mind instantly creates a complete narrative. Housewife, tired, harmless, invisible. That woman could be carrying microfilm in her shopping bag, codes stitched into her hem, a photographic memory of every German position within 50 miles, and no one would look twice because the disguise isn't on her face, it's in their perception. Odette Sansom understood this better than almost anyone. Born in France but working for British intelligence, she infiltrated occupied territory not by trying to look different, but by leveraging exactly who she appeared to be. A courier, a helper, someone's assistant, roles that were beneath notice, positions that granted access while maintaining invisibility. She moved through the networks of the French resistance, coordinating drops, managing communications, all while the Gestapo hunted for the mysterious operative they knew only by codename. They were looking for someone extraordinary, someone dangerous. They walked right past the tired woman waiting for a train. But here's where it gets truly fascinating. Odette's disguise wasn't just external. She had to become the person she was pretending to be. Every gesture had to be authentic. Every response had to come without hesitation. When she was eventually captured and tortured, she maintained a cover story so intricate, so deeply embedded in her psyche, that even under the most brutal interrogation, she never broke character. She convinced her captors she was married to her fellow agent Peter Churchill, claiming he was a nephew of Winston Churchill to protect the wider network. It was a lie built on a foundation of other lies, each one reinforcing the others, creating a persona so complete that reality itself seemed to bend around it. Think about that for a moment. Think about the psychological strength required to maintain an invented identity while your body is being systematically destroyed. That's not acting, that's not pretending, that's something else entirely. It's a level of commitment to deception that transcends the physical and enters the realm of the mind, where the disguise becomes so internalized that the line between real and false identity dissolves completely. Now let's talk about someone even more audacious. Christina Skarbek, known by her British codename Christine Granville, took the art of adaptive disguise to levels that seem almost impossible. Born to Polish aristocracy, she became one of Britain's longest-serving female agents during the war. But her genius wasn't in maintaining one consistent cover. It was in her ability to shift personas on the fly, to read a situation in seconds and become whoever that moment required her to be. Picture this scene. It's 1944, and two of her fellow operatives have been captured by the Gestapo in France, days before the Allied invasion. They're scheduled for execution. Christina doesn't have time for elaborate plans or careful preparation. She walks straight into Gestapo headquarters, but not as a timid local or a submissive clerk. She becomes something else entirely. She presents herself as a British agent, yes, but one with powerful connections, one with information about the imminent Allied invasion. She negotiates like someone who holds all the cards, mixing truth with fabrication so seamlessly that her captors can't tell where one ends and the other begins. She secures the release of both men mere hours before they were to be executed. Then she vanishes. How is that even possible? How do you walk into the heart of enemy power and convince them to release prisoners through sheer force of personality and calculated deception? The answer lies in understanding something crucial about disguise that most people never grasp. It's not about hiding. It's about controlling perception through confidence, through the unshakable projection of belonging exactly where you are. Christina's method was psychological warfare on an intimate scale. She knew that the Gestapo officers sitting across from her were men operating under tremendous pressure, making split-second decisions that could cost them their careers or their lives. She gave them what they were desperately looking for, a way out, a narrative that made sense, a solution that let them save face while releasing prisoners who should have been beyond salvation. She didn't disguise her identity so much as she weaponized their expectations and fears, turning their own cognitive biases against them. If you're finding yourself captivated by how these operatives manipulated perception itself, make sure you're subscribed, because we're about to dive into how these World War II innovations became the blueprint for everything that followed. The war ended, but the need for invisible operatives didn't. If anything, it intensified. The Cold War brought with it a new kind of conflict, one where the battles were fought in shadows and the weapons were information, influence, and infiltration. Intelligence agencies took everything they'd learned from people like Odette and Christina and began to systematize it, to turn individual genius into reproducible methodology. This is when disguise evolved from an art into a science. The CIA, the KGB, MI6, all of them began developing what they called legend building. This wasn't just about creating a false name and a fake passport anymore. This was about constructing entire human beings from scratch. Consider the psychological implications of this. You're asked to forget who you are, to suppress your actual memories and replace them with false ones. You're sent to live in a foreign country under a name that isn't yours, doing a job that's a fabrication, building relationships with people who know you as someone you're not. Every conversation is a performance. Every friendship is potentially a tool or a liability. And you have to maintain this perfectly for years, knowing that a single inconsistency could mean imprisonment, torture, death, or worse, the compromise of operations that affect thousands of lives. The psychological toll was devastating. Intelligence agencies began documenting a phenomenon they called legend fatigue, where operatives started to lose track of which identity was real. Some couldn't successfully reintegrate into their actual lives after missions ended. They'd respond to their real names with confusion. They'd forget details about their actual families. The disguise hadn't just covered them, it had consumed them. There's a documented case from the 1960s of a CIA operative who spent 5 years under deep cover in Eastern Europe. When he was finally extracted and returned to the United States, he couldn't remember his daughter's birthday. He called his wife by the wrong name. The legend he'd built had become more real to him than his actual existence. The agency provided psychological support, but the damage was irreversible. He'd become his disguise so completely that he could never fully become himself again. This raises a question that's as relevant today as it was then. What happens to the self when you practice deception at this level? Is identity something fixed and immutable? Or is it just another construct that can be rewritten, replaced, deleted? These operatives were learning something profound and disturbing about human consciousness. We're not nearly as solid as we think we are. The person you believe yourself to be could be rewritten with enough time and pressure. Your memories, your personality, your sense of self are all more flexible, more vulnerable than you'd ever want to admit. But let's shift gears, because while those Cold War operatives were perfecting the art of becoming other people, technology was beginning to change the entire landscape of disguise. The digital revolution didn't just give us new tools for deception. It created entirely new frontiers where identity itself became fluid, malleable, and ultimately questionable. Fast forward to today. Right now, someone is creating a complete digital identity that has never existed as a physical person. They're generating photos using artificial intelligence, creating social media histories going back years, building networks of connections with real people who believe they're interacting with someone genuine. This isn't a person in disguise anymore. This is a disguise without a person, an identity that exists only in data and pixels, but can influence elections, manipulate stock markets, or recruit operatives for terrorist organizations. The scale is what's truly staggering. During World War II, each operative in disguise was a massive investment of time and resources. Training took months. Each mission was carefully planned. The number of people who could maintain these deceptions was inherently limited by human capacity. But digital disguises, they scale infinitely. A single intelligence officer can now manage hundreds of fake personas simultaneously, each one interacting with real people, gathering intelligence, spreading disinformation, or recruiting assets. The mathematics of espionage have fundamentally changed. Social media platforms have become the new occupied territory, and everyone moving through them could potentially be someone else entirely. Think about the implications. That person you've been messaging for months, sharing your thoughts and fears with, could be an algorithm. That influencer with hundreds of thousands of followers could be an intelligence operation run out of a building in Moscow or Beijing or Virginia. The photos are AI-generated. The opinions are carefully calculated propaganda. The entire persona is a weapon aimed at your perception of reality. And it gets more sophisticated every single day. Deep fake technology has reached the point where you can't trust video evidence anymore. Someone can take footage of a world leader, manipulate their words in real time, and create a clip that's absolutely indistinguishable from reality. Audio can be cloned from just a few seconds of speech. An operative can call you using your mother's voice, your boss's voice, anyone's voice, and you'd never know it wasn't them. Hit that like button if you're starting to question everything you thought you knew about identity and reality, because we're just getting started. Biometric security was supposed to solve this. Fingerprints, iris scans, facial recognition, these were meant to be the ultimate truth, the one thing that couldn't be faked or disguised. But we're already seeing that certainty crumble. Researchers have successfully fooled facial recognition systems with carefully designed makeup patterns. Fingerprint spoofs can be created from high-resolution photos. Iris patterns can be replicated with specialized contact lenses. The race between recognition technology and advanced camouflage isn't over. It's barely even begun. There's an entire shadow industry developing around these challenges. Companies you've never heard of are creating materials that confuse facial recognition algorithms, clothing patterns that make you invisible to certain types of cameras, makeup techniques that add or subtract decades from your apparent age in ways that fool both human observers and machine learning systems. The disguise isn't a false mustache anymore. It's encoded in the wavelengths of light reflecting off your face, in the thermal signature your body produces, in the gait patterns that artificial intelligence uses to identify you from 100 meters away. And then there's the psychological dimension of digital disguise that nobody talks about. When Odette Sansom infiltrated occupied France, she knew her enemies. She could see them, read their body language, adjust her performance in real time. But modern operatives are often disguising themselves for audiences they never meet, optimizing personas for algorithms they don't fully understand. How do you maintain a consistent character when your target is artificial intelligence that analyzes thousands of data points you don't even know you're generating? The answer is that you don't. Modern covert identities are often managed by teams of specialists, behavioral psychologists who ensure the persona's online interactions seem authentic, data scientists who optimize the social media footprint to avoid algorithmic detection, cultural experts who make sure references and language patterns match the claimed background. A single digital disguise can involve dozens of people maintaining different aspects of the illusion. It's collaborative fiction on a scale that would have been unimaginable during World War II. But here's what keeps intelligence professionals awake at night. If everyone can disguise themselves digitally with increasing ease, how do you tell who anyone really is? How do you conduct intelligence gathering when every source could be a fabrication? How do you trust any information when videos can be faked, voices can be cloned, and entire networks of seemingly real people could all be one person or an algorithm? We're approaching a crisis of verification. The same technologies that allow operatives to create undetectable disguises also mean that truth itself becomes almost impossible to establish. We've entered an era where reality is negotiable, where the loudest lie often becomes accepted fact simply because it's repeated by enough fake personas to seem like consensus. Disguise isn't just a tool for spies anymore, it's become a fundamental challenge to epistemology, to our ability to know anything at all. Let's pull back for a moment and ask a bigger question. Why does disguise work in the first place? Why are humans so consistently fooled by these deceptions, whether they're physical disguises from World War II or digital fabrications today? The answer lies in how our brains are wired, and once you understand these vulnerabilities, you'll see how they're being exploited everywhere around you. Human perception is not a camera. We don't objectively record what's in front of us and then analyze it rationally. Instead, our brains are constantly making predictions, filling in gaps, taking shortcuts to conserve cognitive energy. This is called predictive processing, and it's incredibly efficient for everyday life. It lets you navigate a crowded street without consciously analyzing every face, recognize your friend from across a room by their posture alone, or know someone's emotional state from the slightest change in their expression. But this efficiency creates vulnerabilities that master deceivers exploit ruthlessly. Your brain is always trying to match incoming sensory information to existing patterns and expectations. Show it something that roughly fits a familiar category, and it'll fill in the details automatically, often incorrectly. This is why Odette Sansom's ordinary appearance was such an effective disguise. German soldiers weren't looking for a middle-aged woman carrying packages. Their threat detection systems were primed for anomalies, nervous behavior, inappropriate dress, suspicious patterns. Ordinary was invisible precisely because it required no cognitive processing. There's a famous psychological experiment that demonstrates this perfectly. Researchers had participants watch a video of people passing a basketball and count the passes. Halfway through the video, someone in a gorilla suit walks into frame, beats their chest and walks off. 50% of participants focused on counting passes never saw the gorilla. Their attention was directed elsewhere, and their brains simply didn't process the anomaly. This is called inattentional blindness, and it's exactly what World War II operatives were exploiting. Direct attention towards something expected, and the unexpected becomes invisible. But there's another cognitive bias that's even more powerful: confirmation bias. Once your brain has settled on an explanation for what it's seeing, it actively filters out information that contradicts that explanation and amplifies information that confirms it. This is why Christina Skarbek's audacious negotiation with the Gestapo worked. Once she'd established a narrative that she was a British agent with valuable information and powerful connections. Every word she spoke was interpreted through that lens. The Gestapo officers were looking for confirmation of the story she'd given them, not evidence against it. Modern social engineering attacks use these same principles. A hacker calls a company claiming to be from IT support. They use the right jargon, reference real systems, sound confident and slightly annoyed. The person on the other end of the phone's brain makes a snap judgment. This is an IT person, annoyed because they have to deal with another problem. Once that frame is set, every request sounds reasonable. Handover passwords? Of course, IT needs those. Bypass security protocols? Obviously, they're troubleshooting a critical issue. The disguise isn't in the voice or the name. It's in the narrative frame that makes everything that follows seem logical. There's something even more unsettling about how easily we can be manipulated. Humans are fundamentally social creatures, wired to respond to emotional cues and establish rapport quickly. This served us well for thousands of years in small tribal groups where everyone knew everyone. But in the modern world, where we interact with strangers constantly, this instinct becomes a vulnerability. Skilled operatives know how to trigger these social responses artificially to create the feeling of trust and familiarity in minutes. This is called manufactured intimacy, and it's frighteningly effective. An operative might mention a shared background detail, mirror your body language, reference common experiences. Your brain registers these as signs of kinship, of being part of the same in-group. Oxytocin levels rise. Your critical thinking diminishes slightly. You become more likely to share information, to trust, to help. And all of it is calculated, rehearsed, a performance designed to hijack your neurochemistry. Intelligence agencies train their operatives extensively in these techniques. They learn to read micro-expressions, those tiny involuntary facial movements that last less than a second but reveal genuine emotions. They learn to control their own micro-expressions to ensure their face shows only what they want it to show. They study vocal patterns, learning to adjust pitch, tempo, and rhythm to match whoever they're speaking with, creating unconscious rapport. Every handshake, every angle of eye contact, every casual comment is optimized to shape perception. The people best at this are terrifying to observe in action because you can't see the manipulation happening. It feels natural. It feels like you're making your own decisions, forming your own opinions, but you're being guided through an invisible maze of psychological triggers, each one pushing you gently toward a conclusion someone else has selected for you. Subscribe now because we're about to explore how these psychological techniques are being weaponized on massive scales through technology you're using every single day. Now let's talk about the future, because what's coming makes everything we've discussed so far look primitive. We're on the edge of technologies that will make disguise so seamless, so perfect, that the very concept of verifiable identity might become obsolete. And the implications of that are staggering. Nanotechnology is developing materials that can change color, texture, and light reflectivity in real time based on environmental conditions or programmed instructions. Imagine clothing that adjusts its appearance continuously to match whatever background you're against, not just in visible light, but across infrared and ultraviolet spectrums. You wouldn't just be wearing camouflage, you'd be wearing adaptive camouflage that makes you nearly invisible to both human observers and sensor systems. Prototypes of this technology already exist in military research labs. Within a decade, it could be commercially available. But that's just the beginning. Researchers are working on something called smart skin, synthetic materials that can be applied to human skin and programmed to change appearance. Want to look 20 years older? Apply the smart skin and adjust the settings. Need to alter your apparent ethnicity for an undercover operation? The material can adjust pigmentation, texture, even perceived bone structure through clever use of light manipulation and microscale topography. This isn't science fiction, this is emerging technology with functional prototypes. And then there's the truly unsettling frontier, brain-computer interfaces that manipulate perception directly. What if the disguise isn't on the person at all, but in the observer's mind? Early experiments have already demonstrated that targeted electromagnetic stimulation can cause people to misperceive faces, to fail to recognize people they know, or to see faces in patterns that don't contain them. As our understanding of neural manipulation advances, the possibility emerges of disguises that work by literally changing what people perceive, regardless of what's actually there. Think about that for a moment. You could be looking directly at someone, but your visual cortex is receiving signals that make you see someone completely different. The disguise isn't physical, it's neurological. How would you ever know? How could you trust your own senses? This technology is being developed right now under the guise of medical treatments for prosopagnosia and other perceptual disorders. But the dual-use potential is obvious. Intelligence agencies are absolutely paying attention to this research. Within 20 years, we might see operatives equipped with devices that can subtly influence the perception of everyone within a certain radius, making them appear unremarkable, uninteresting, unmemorable. Not invisible exactly, but functionally so, because no one's brain is registering them as significant enough to encode into memory. The ethical implications are staggering and largely unexplored. We already struggle with issues of consent and privacy in a world where cameras are everywhere and facial recognition is routine. But what happens when identity itself becomes fluid, when you can never be certain that the person you're looking at is actually the person you're seeing? What happens to trust, to relationships, to the basic social contract that holds civilization together? Some theorists argue we're approaching what they call the trust apocalypse, a point where the technologies of deception become so advanced and so widespread that verification becomes impossible. Every video could be fake. Every voice could be synthesized. Every document could be fabricated. Every person could be someone else. At that point, society would have to reorganize around completely different principles because the assumption that seeing is believing would be dead. Others argue that we'll develop new forms of verification, probably blockchain-based identity systems that create immutable records of who someone is. But those systems have their own vulnerabilities. They require trust in institutions and technologies that could be compromised. They create single points of failure, and they might create a bifurcated world where those with verified identities have access and privileges, while those without them become permanently marginalized. There's another possibility that's even more disturbing. What if we're already living in the early stages of this crisis, and we just don't realize it yet? How many of the people you interact with online are real? How many of the social media accounts driving public discourse are genuine humans versus bots or sock puppets? How many of the videos you've seen that shaped your understanding of events were manipulated in ways you'd never detect? The answer is we don't know, and that's precisely the point. The erosion of certainty has already begun. We're just not fully aware of how deep it goes because the most effective disguises are the ones you never notice. Here's something that should genuinely terrify you. Deep learning algorithms can now analyze vast amounts of data about a person: their social media posts, their shopping habits, their location data, their communication patterns, and generate predictions about their behavior that are more accurate than the person's own self-reports. These algorithms can create what's essentially a digital twin, a model of you that predicts what you'll do better than you can. Now imagine an intelligence operative using that digital twin to craft the perfect disguise for infiltrating your life. They'd know exactly what kind of person you'd trust, what background story you'd find compelling, what vulnerabilities you'd be most likely to respond to. They could become the friend you didn't know you were looking for, the colleague who seems to understand you perfectly, the romantic interest who shares all your passions. And it would all be calculated, optimized, a disguise so perfect it's based on a complete model of your psychology. This is already happening. Social engineering attacks are increasingly using these predictive models. The era of generic phishing emails is ending. The new attacks are hyper-personalized, crafted to exploit specific individuals based on comprehensive psychological profiles. The disguise isn't just visual or verbal anymore. It's predictive, probabilistic, powered by artificial intelligence that understands human behavior better than humans understand themselves. Like this video, if you're realizing that everything you thought was solid ground is actually shifting sand, because we need to talk about what all of this means for you personally right now. So where does all of this leave us? Are we doomed to live in a world where nothing can be trusted, where everyone might be someone else, where reality itself is negotiable? Maybe. But understanding the mechanisms of disguise also gives us tools to resist them. First, awareness is half the battle. Now that you understand how cognitive biases like inattentional blindness and confirmation bias make you vulnerable to deception, you can actively work to counter them. Question your initial impressions. Look for evidence that contradicts your assumptions. When something feels obviously true, that's exactly when you should be most skeptical, because that feeling of obviousness is often a sign that your brain has stopped processing and started pattern matching. Second, develop what security professionals call security mindset, a habit of constantly asking how systems could be exploited or deceived. Don't just accept things at face value. Think about what incentives might be at play, what you're not being shown, what questions aren't being asked. This doesn't mean becoming paranoid. It means becoming thoughtfully skeptical, maintaining a healthy distance between observation and conclusion. Third, diversify your information sources radically. Disguise and deception thrive when you're operating in an echo chamber where all your information confirms what you already believe. Actively seek out perspectives that make you uncomfortable, sources that challenge your assumptions. Not to blindly believe them either, but to prevent any single narrative from dominating your understanding unopposed. Fourth, and this is crucial, maintain awareness of your emotional state when processing information. Strong emotions, fear, anger, excitement, hope, all reduce critical thinking and make you more vulnerable to manipulation. When you feel that emotional surge in response to information, that's a red flag. Step back, let the emotion subside, then analyze the content again with as much dispassion as you can muster. But here's the deeper truth that all of this points to. Identity itself is stranger and more fluid than most people ever consider. We think of ourselves as solid, consistent, unchanging across time. But those World War II operatives proved something profound. Given the right circumstances, you can become someone else so completely that your original identity seems like the illusion. Modern neuroscience is confirming this. The self isn't a thing. It's a process, a story your brain tells itself, and that story can be rewritten. This is simultaneously frightening and liberating. Frightening because it means you're more vulnerable to manipulation than you realized. Liberating because it means you're not trapped by who you think you are. The same plasticity that makes disguise possible also makes personal transformation possible. You have more agency over your own identity than you might believe. The operatives we've discussed, Odette, Christina, the unnamed Cold War agents who lived as other people for years, they demonstrated the outer limits of what human consciousness can do. They proved that with sufficient will and training, you can rewrite yourself, can become genuinely different in ways that go far beyond surface appearance. That's not just a tool for espionage. It's a demonstration of human potential that's relevant to anyone trying to change their life, overcome trauma, or reinvent themselves. So here's the question we should all be asking. In a world where identity is increasingly fluid, where disguise is increasingly perfect, what anchors us? What makes us real? The answer might be this. Authenticity isn't about consistency or unchangeability. It's about conscious choice. It's about knowing who you're deciding to be in each moment and why. The operatives who maintained their sanity through years of deception were the ones who never forgot their true purpose, their core mission, the reason they'd chosen to become someone else. For most of us, the disguises we wear are subtler. We present different faces to different people, the professional self at work, the relaxed self with friends, the dutiful self with family. We adjust our behavior, our speech patterns, our expressed opinions based on context. In a sense, we're all always in disguise, always performing some version of identity that fits the social situation we're in. The question is whether we're aware of it, whether we're doing it consciously and for reasons we've examined, or whether we're just reacting, letting social pressure and unconscious biases shape us without our knowledge or consent. The art of disguise, when you really understand it, becomes the art of conscious self-determination. It's about understanding that identity is performance, that perception shapes reality, and that you have more control over both than you probably thought possible. The same techniques that let World War II operatives infiltrate enemy organizations can help you navigate complex social environments, manage how others perceive you, and ultimately shape your own life more intentionally. But remember this, with great power comes great responsibility. The more you understand about how to manipulate perception, the greater your ethical obligation to use that knowledge wisely. Every tool of deception can be turned toward noble purposes or destructive ones. Odette used disguise to fight fascism. Modern operatives use it to prevent terrorism, but the same techniques can be used to exploit the vulnerable, to spread disinformation, to undermine democracy itself. We're living through a pivotal moment in human history. The technologies of disguise and deception are becoming more powerful just as our social and political systems are under unprecedented strain. The future will be determined by how we collectively decide to handle this tension. Do we try to lock down identity, to create systems of verification and surveillance that make disguise impossible? That path leads toward authoritarianism, toward a world where every movement is tracked, every interaction recorded, privacy obliterated in the name of security. Or do we accept radical uncertainty, acknowledge that we can never be completely sure of what we're seeing, and build social systems resilient enough to function anyway? That path requires developing new forms of trust, new ways of establishing truth, new social contracts that don't depend on the certainty of visual verification. It requires, fundamentally, that we learn to live with ambiguity and develop better tools for critical thinking and verification. There's no easy answer, but understanding the history and science of disguise, from those World War II operatives walking past Nazi soldiers to the AI-generated personas influencing you on social media right now, gives us a better chance of navigating what's coming. Knowledge is never a guarantee of safety, but ignorance is a guarantee of vulnerability. The next time you look at someone, whether in person or through a screen, hold two thoughts simultaneously. First, accept what you see at face value, because paranoia is paralyzing and most people are exactly who they appear to be. But second, maintain a small corner of awareness that whispers, maybe not. That balance between trust and skepticism, between accepting reality and questioning it, might be the most important cognitive skill for the century we're living through. The shadows that Odette and Christina moved through in occupied Europe aren't gone. They've just changed form. They're in your social media feeds, in your video calls, in the gap between what something appears to be and what it actually is. The art of disguise hasn't disappeared. It's become ubiquitous, invisible, woven into the fabric of modern existence. And the only way to maintain any agency in that world is to understand it, to see through the illusions, not because you're cynical, but because you're awake. Reality isn't what you see. It never has been. It's what you can verify, what you can triangulate from multiple sources, what survives rigorous skepticism and still stands. In an age of perfect disguise, truth becomes not the obvious but the persistent, not what everyone agrees on, but what evidence compels. That's a harder standard, a more demanding way of engaging with the world, but it might be the only way to maintain any certainty at all. From the theatre of World War II espionage to the digital battlefields of the 21st century, from Odette's quiet courage to the algorithmic deceptions shaping society right now, the art of disguise reveals something essential about the human condition. We are what we pretend to be, so we must be careful what we pretend to be. Our identities are more fragile and more powerful than we realize, and in the end, the greatest disguise might be the one we wear for ourselves, the story we tell about who we are that shapes everything we become. Stay curious, stay skeptical,